I kind of have questions about the before more than the after because I think a lot of people don't know that the United States actually had a lot of influence in what led up to 9/11 with the training and funding of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan and the Soviet invasion. And that literally directly correlates to Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden forming Al-Qaeda. So I think I'm interested to know why I'm interested to know why the American education system only focuses on the event itself and not the before and the after effects.
How many of you know what she's talking about, what she just said? How many of you know? Raise your hands really high if you know what she's referring to. So, okay, it looks like less than 5% of the class for sure. You raised your hand when I said, "Hey, does anyone know what Taylor's talking about?" And you were like, "Yeah." What do you? Can you just say a couple more things about what she was saying?
Yeah, I don't know a lot about it, but I know that the Soviets were invading Afghanistan back in, I think it was the 80s, maybe, or the 90s. I think it was the 80s. And that the U.S. funded and armed a group called the Mujahideen, and I believe Osama bin Laden was a member of the Mujahideen,
and what's it lead you to say? Like, what's your conclusion about that?
Not as much of a conclusion as much as like this is part of the little bit that I know.
Just questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I know that I remember seeing earlier this year there was a tweet with an old picture of like a newspaper article that said, a U.S. newspaper article that had like this brave Mujahideen, leader Osama bin Laden talking about him fighting against the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan at the time.
I guess the question that formed when I was listening to Taylor and her information that she provided would be like what training aided those terrorists to be able to like attack our country. Because I was uneducated about that. The U.S. had direct relations with training in that instance. So I was unaware of that. So that's a question that stemmed based off of what I just learned right now.
Mo, do you talk about this back in Saudi at all? Because 15 of the 19, there were supposed to be 20. There were 19, 15 of them were Saudis. So do you guys talk about what led up to that, their radicalization? Or?
I think what started it all was the war between the U.S., or at least what I know is that it was the war between the U.S. and the Soviet Union that happened in Afghanistan, and how both governments were supporting the Afghans in war against the Soviet Union, and then some of them were children, and there were children with weapons, and no schools were available or anything. That's why they only saw weapons, and they saw a chance to do what they had done.
So we've already agreed, or you've already said that neither of you have ever met a radical Muslim. I never have either. I mean, I've met thousands of Muslims. I've never met anyone who was radicalized, who at least admitted to it, and I don't know. I just haven't. So it's not been part of my reality. So
I did, and I actually had to find that out for myself too, because they didn't really teach about that in schools. But I do remember a couple years back, I read a little bit about that, how the U.S. government encouraged creating these groups to help them fight their war, and how they ended up, going rogue and becoming what we know as the terrorist organizations today.
If we go back in the post-World War II period, the world was divided between the U.S. and the USSR, the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republics. Fundamentally, the first world, the second world, the eagle and the bear. And we were fighting it out. The Soviet Union called themselves the communist nation. We were capitalists. They were the communist bloc. We were the capitalist democratic bloc, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever those things mean, but that basically is it right there. The West is in the blue, and the red is the Soviet Union, and we were just fighting it out all over the place. And all in Africa, we're fighting it out. In the Middle East, we're fighting it out. And the Soviets are arming people, and we're arming people, and we're just have these proxy wars going on where we're just going to They want to take over the world. We want to take over the world. We want the whole world to follow us. They want the whole world to follow them. They're militarized. We're militarized. We're spending far too much money, in my humble opinion, but who am I? Much money on weapons of war, and we're distributing those weapons around the world, and we're just fighting it out with each other. Okay, next slide. That's the starting point. And so in 79, the Afghan government had become socialist. They elected a socialist communist government, and things were going wrong. And so the Soviet Union had been supporting them economically and militarily, and so they invaded Afghanistan in 1979. And the United States said, hey, this is a really good opportunity to weaken the Soviet Union, like our arch enemies, right? We're going to weaken them. And so the way we're going to do it is we're going to support the people who are fighting against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. And so these became the sort of beginning stages of what's called the Mujahideen. And the Mujahideen are people who are warriors. There are a couple ways to see it, but warriors who are fighting for the survival and expansion of Islam. We arm them with lots of weapons. And this is the Mujahideen in the White House with Ronald Reagan. That's Reagan in the back there in the black suit, right? We arm them with weapons, lots of weapons, because we want to give them whatever weapons they need to defeat the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union is our enemies. And so we give them lots of weapons, including surface-to-air missiles. These things shoot down aircraft and helicopters. So these are like, you don't put these out among terrorists. Like, you just don't do that. But we did. So we gave the Mujahideen Stingers. Here's just this is a civilian aircraft in Afghanistan that was shot down by the Mujahideen with one of these Stinger missiles. So these are the kinds of things, if you put out, they're going to come back and get you. Osama bin Laden emerged out of this Mujahideen movement. He was one of the leaders. So all of his early training and all of his early organization with the Mujahideen, building up all of these folks, these radical Islamists, he played a primary role in this, and he and others like him are the ones who we gave lots of weapons to fight our arch enemies. But what happened was eventually they take over in Afghanistan. They become the Taliban. Right? So it's like, oh my God, this is what you're getting at. When you play with weapons of war, the weapons are going to come back and kill lots of people. In the end, Osama bin Laden is the person who played the primary role in orchestrating the attacks in 9/11. So the same person who years earlier we were holding up, giving weapons to, doing the things, like this is what you do, this societies do, but if you play by war, if you play by violence, the violence is going to come in multiple directions. It's just how it is. That's how life is. And so in this particular case, it came back. Now, that's not to say that we caused 9/11. That's not to say the United States wanted 9/11. It's not to say any of that. It's to say that an unintended consequence of supporting war over a period of time is it's going to come back and attack you. And so this is part of this thing that we're dealing with. And so, Taylor, you're asking, why don't we talk about this? Because that's over and that's in the past. But the question is, what about the next time? Maybe if we talked about this, maybe then the next time this is about to happen, maybe we would figure out not to go down that route. You see, like, you look in the past to understand the future. Did you have a comment, bro?
Yes, Prince Bandar bin Sultan was the Saudi ambassador of the Saudi embassy at the United States at the time. And in one of his interviews, he said something really interesting that really sparked an idea in my mind. He said that if after winning the war, we had stayed there and spent like another $100 million or something, and spent like 2 years after that, took these weapons and built schools and hospitals and made a civilization over there, 9/11 might not have even happened.
Things could be different. Like, we don't know. And mind you, this isn't, what I'm talking about is, what I'm saying, and I think what Taylor, you were saying, and Taylor, I want you to respond to what I'm saying now, if you could, in a second. So, it's not anti-American at all, and it's not anti-military, and it's understanding. You want to have a deeper understanding. So Taylor, what I just said, is that kind of along the lines of some things that you have learned?
Yeah, I would say that just being able to understand things helps you learn from those mistakes, because you're never gonna be able to like learn if you don't know what to learn from.
Yeah. Yeah, you won't know.
So I just wanted to ask, right? We hear about how like they turned, right? Why did they turn on the U.S.?
Why did what?
Why did Osama bin Laden and the Taliban turn?
Yeah.
What caused them to,
Well, they were never our allies, right? We needed someone to fight a war. They were willing to fight the war. They said, give us weapons, we'll fight the war for you, but we're not on your side. In the end, they very quickly turned on us because they didn't want any foreigners inside of Muslim countries. So they were like, these are really radicalized people. So they're like, you're going to get out. Well, we'll come after you. And people knew that. I mean, but the need to fight the communist countries was so great that we were willing to do something that we didn't want to do. You cannot understand the Taliban if you don't understand where they came from and how they got supported and why they exist, because they just would have not existed, or there would be just these small isolated groups of people in Pakistan, for example, right? Because they really very much emerged out of also in Pakistan.